My name is Angelina. I'm 28 years old and I live in New York. From the outside, it might look like I've got it together. A steady job, a quiet apartment, and a smile that never really fades. But what most people don't know is that behind that smile is a lifetime of wounds. Wounds I've carried since I was a little girl. My story doesn't begin with hope. It begins with pain, inside the four cracked walls of a broken home. I grew up in Queens, in a two-bedroom apartment that never really felt like a home. My parents fought more than they talked. My dad was a failed musician who drowned in alcohol instead of dreams. My mom was a waitress who worked herself to the bone, not because she loved us, but because she didn't know what else to do. Love wasn't something I saw in our house. I saw yelling, I saw bruises, I saw cold dinners and colder silences. By the time I was 7, I'd already figured out how to disappear. I spent hours in my room drawing imaginary families, ones that hugged each other, laughed at dinner, danced in the kitchen. Mine never did any of that. My dad came home drunk more nights than sober. My mom came home exhausted and mean. They fought so loudly I would sometimes hide in the closet just to escape it. I remember one night, my mom threw a plate across the room and it shattered against the wall. I didn't even flinch. That's when I knew something inside me was already numb. School was the only place I felt remotely normal. But even there, I lied to protect myself. I'd make up stories about weekend outings, fake smiles when kids talked about their dads taking them to the park. I remember one girl telling the class about how her dad made pancakes every Saturday morning. I went home and cried in the bathroom, not because I wanted pancakes, but because I just wanted to be remembered. Things at home only got worse. My dad lost job after job. He'd rage, blame the world, blame my mom, blame me. I started tiptoeing around the apartment, avoiding eye contact, staying out of the way. I became a master of silence. My mom, too tired to deal with him, began to drink in secret. She'd fall asleep on the couch with a glass of wine still in her hand and snore through the screaming. I'd clean up, do my homework, and pretend everything was fine, but pretending gets exhausting. When I was 13, it all exploded. It was winter, I remember. Snow blanketed the city and it should have felt magical. But inside our apartment, it felt like a war zone. That night, my dad came home in one of his moods. Drunk. Angry. My mom said something he didn't like, and I watched him push her so hard she hit her head against the wall. She slid down to the floor, dazed, bleeding. Something inside me snapped. I screamed. I begged him to stop. And for the first time, my mom looked up at me, really looked, and whispered, "Pack a bag. We're leaving." We ended up at a women's shelter. Just me, my mom, and the kind of silence that felt different. It wasn't heavy with anger, but with shame. The shelter was cramped and loud. Kids cried. Moms whispered. But for once, we weren't afraid of the man who'd terrorized us. That should have felt like relief. But it just felt like emptiness. I started drawing again. It was the only thing that made sense. One of the counselors there, Miss Carla, saw my sketches and said, "You've got something special, Angelina." No one had ever said that to me before. She bought me a real sketchbook and told me to draw what I felt, not what I thought I should feel, but the truth. And so I did. I drew pain. I drew fire. I drew a girl screaming in a silent room. It was ugly, and it was honest, and it was mine. When we moved into our own place a few months later, a dingy, little apartment paid for by a housing program, I thought things might get better. But trauma follows you. My mom was free from my father. but she wasn't free from herself. She kept drinking. Sometimes she'd stare at me like I was the reason for her pain, like I reminded her of all the choices she regretted. I was 15 when I started working part-time to help cover bills. A bookstore downtown hired me to shelve books. I'd spend hours there, escaping into stories that weren't mine. I'd imagine being someone else, anyone else. But no matter how far I escaped, in my mind, reality always dragged me back home, to my mother passed out on the couch, to cold, leftovers in the fridge, to silence that felt more suffocating than any scream. At 16, I stopped trying to be happy. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just blank. I didn't expect anything from anyone. I didn't believe in love. I didn't believe in promises. I just kept moving, one day at a time. But no matter how much pain I went through, I never gave up completely. Somewhere deep down, I still carried a tiny flicker of hope. Hope that maybe, someday, someone would see me. Not the broken parts, not the history, but me. That hope turned into something real when I met him. He walked into the bookstore one afternoon, tall, kind eyes, confident in a quiet way. He asked for a book I happened to love, and we started talking. His name was Liam, and just like that, a spark lit up in the ashes of my world. I didn't fall fast. I didn't trust easily, but he was patient. He made me laugh. He listened. He noticed things, like how I always carried a pencil in my pocket, or how I looked away when someone raised their voice. And he never pushed. He just stayed. We started dating. I was 19 when I moved in with him. For the first time in my life, I felt safe. He encouraged my art. He made breakfast on Sundays. He kissed my forehead every night. And I began to believe that maybe my story could be different. But life doesn't always give you a happy ending. Not right away. Because one day, everything changed. And that change didn't come in the form of a fight. It came in the form of a message on his phone. When I first moved in with Liam, I truly believed the worst was behind me. After years of surviving chaos, it felt like I had finally stepped into a life where I could exhale. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't drink. He didn't disappear into silence or explode in anger. Liam made the bed every morning. He asked how my day was and listened. He even surprised me once with a small sketch pad and a set of colored pencils, just like the ones Miss Carla had given me years ago. I remember how my hands shook when I opened the gift, not because it was expensive or extravagant, but because it showed he saw me. The small apartment we shared in Brooklyn wasn't much, but to me it felt like a palace. The walls were white, the windows were big, and the air didn't feel like it was closing in on me. We filled it with books and plants and little signs of life that I never had growing up. We hung fairy lights in the living room and cooked dinner together in the tiny kitchen. It felt like I was finally learning how to live, not just exist. For a while, I convinced myself that I had escaped my past, that I wasn't the broken girl anymore, that I could rewrite my story. Liam supported me when I decided to go back to school. I enrolled in a part-time graphic design program and picked up freelance gigs designing book covers online. I was finally building something of my own. A career, a future, a sense of self-worth. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. At first, it was small. He started staying out late without texting. Then he started forgetting little, Things, like the name of my professor I talked about every week or the fact that my big presentation was coming up, I brushed it off. Everyone gets busy. Relationships go through phases. He always smiled, always kissed me goodnight. What reason did I have to doubt him? But that's the thing about growing up in a home like mine. You develop instincts. Silent, alarms deep inside you that start ringing when something's not right. I had ignored them for years because I wanted so badly to believe I was safe. But they started ringing again, loud, persistent. One night I was cleaning up after dinner. Liam was in the shower. His phone lit up on the counter, and for a second, I hesitated. I wasn't the jealous type. I had never gone through his phone before. But that night, something pulled me. Like the air shifted. Like the universe wanted me to see. The screen lit up again, a message from a name I didn't recognize. I miss you already. Last night was amazing. Time stopped. I stared at the screen, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I felt like I was underwater, like my body was numb but my brain was screaming. I didn't need to read anything else. That one sentence told me everything I needed to. No. I sat down on the edge of the couch and waited. When Liam came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, still humming to himself, I didn't say a word. I just held up the phone. His face changed. Just for a second. A flicker of guilt. A flash of fear. But then, nothing. Just a long sigh. Like this was an inconvenience. Like I had caught him doing something mildly annoying. Like I had asked him about an unpaid bill or forgotten laundry. I'm sorry, he said eventually. I didn't mean for it to happen. Didn't mean for it to happen? Those words felt like knives. I had spent years building myself up, brick by fragile brick. I had trusted him with every scar, every fear, every broken piece of me. And he had taken that trust and crushed it like it meant nothing. I asked how long it had been going on. He didn't answer. I asked if he loved her. He shrugged. And just like that, the world I had fought so hard to build came crashing down. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not in front of him. I packed a small bag, took my sketch pad and laptop and left. The same way my mother once told me to pack a bag and run. Except this time, I didn't need anyone to tell me. I knew. I knew that staying would mean letting someone else's choices destroy me. Again. I spent the first night on my friend Maya's couch. She didn't ask questions, just opened her arms and let me fall apart. The tears came at 2 a.m. and didn't stop until the sun came up. I cried for Liam, for my mother. For the little girl who still lived inside me, still hoping that someone would stay, still believing she was finally safe. Over the next few weeks, I moved into a small sublet, a studio in the Bronx with noisy pipes and a temperamental heater. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was honest. No lies, no pretense, just me and my broken heart and my pencils. I stopped drawing for a while. Every time I picked up a pencil, all I could see was the life I thought I had, the future I had started planning. I felt stupid, gullible, weak. But Maya reminded me of something one night, over takeout and cheap wine. You survived worse, she said, looking me dead in the eye. This isn't the end. This is a bruise, not a death sentence. I wanted to believe her. But healing isn't linear. Some days, I felt strong. Other days, I couldn't get out of bed. The betrayal hadn't just shattered my relationship, it had shattered me. It brought up everything I had buried: my father's anger, my mother's indifference, the years of neglect and silence. It was like Liam had ripped the scab off every wound I had ever hidden. For weeks, I walked around in a daze. I avoided people. I ignored calls. I told Maya I was fine even when I wasn't. Because that's what I always did: cope silently. I had been trained by life to swallow my pain whole and keep smiling. But one morning, something changed. I woke up, looked in the mirror, and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She had dark circles under her eyes, messy hair, and a hollow look. But more than that, she looked tired of hurting. So I picked up my pencil again. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. I needed to feel something other than betrayal. I started drawing fury, heartbreak, disappointment, every ugly feeling I had been carrying. I didn't try to make it beautiful. I made it real. I drew Liam not as the man I loved, but as the man who broke me. I drew myself, curled up on the floor, then standing up. Slowly, painfully, but standing. Each drawing was a piece of therapy I didn't know I needed. I started uploading them, anonymously online, under the name Ashes and Art. I didn't expect anyone to care, but people did. They started commenting, messaging me, sharing their own stories of betrayal and pain. I wasn't alone, and neither were they. I started writing captions beneath each post, telling pieces of my story, fragments of truth that had been buried too long. And with every post, I felt lighter, not healed, not yet, but lighter. One message changed everything. A girl named Naomi messaged me. "Your art saved me. I was about to go back to someone who hurt me, but your words reminded me of my worth. Thank you." I read it over and over again, tears streaming down my face. Because for the first time in months, I realized something. My pain had a purpose. It didn't excuse what Liam did. It didn't erase the betrayal. But it gave the suffering a shape, a voice, a meaning. I wasn't just a victim. I was a survivor. And now I was someone else's lifeline. I started drawing every day again. Not for money, not for followers. For me. For the little girl who hid in closets. For the teenager who worked double shifts. For the woman who walked away from someone who didn't love her enough. I began to feel whole again. Not because someone fixed me, but because I finally stopped waiting for someone else to do it. Liam tried to reach out a few months later. He sent an apology email, said he'd made a mistake, said he missed me. I didn't even respond. Not because I hated him, but because I had finally learned the difference between forgiveness and permission. I forgave him, for me. But I would never give him permission to hurt me again. It took everything I had to walk away from that relationship. But it gave me something far more valuable than love. It gave me clarity. That betrayal, as brutal as it was, cracked me open. It forced me to face the wounds I had buried for years. It taught me that trust isn't about hoping someone won't break your heart. It's about knowing you'll survive if they do, and I did survive. But more importantly, I began to grow, because sometimes pain isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of your transformation. When someone betrays you, it doesn't just shatter your heart, it shakes your sense of reality. For a long time, I thought I'd never feel steady again. Liam's betrayal opened every old wound I thought I'd healed. I had to face not just the pain he caused me, but the pain I had carried since I was a child. The chaos, the fear, the deep-rooted belief that I was never going to be enough. But in the middle of all that pain, I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay broken. Storms don't always come to destroy. Sometimes they come to cleanse, and that's what this storm did. It forced me to strip away the versions of myself that were built on survival and trauma, and start rebuilding based on truth, strength, and self-love. For the first time in my life, I started going to therapy. I sat across from a kind-eyed woman named Joyce and told her everything. The nights in the closet, the screaming, the bruises, the boy who made me believe I was safe, and then left me shattered. I expected her to look at me with pity, but she didn't. She looked at me like I was powerful, brave, worthy. Every week I unpacked a little more. I learned that my worth was never tied to someone else's ability to love me. I learned that love built on trauma is not love, it's dependency. I learned that just because I came from a broken home didn't mean I was destined to live a broken life. And I started healing. Piece by piece. The art I had once used to express pain started to transform. The drawings became lighter, the lines softer. Instead of women curled in corners, I drew them standing tall, holding their own hearts in their hands. My page, once a battlefield of grief, was now a garden growing from it. And something amazing happened. People noticed. My anonymous Instagram page, Ashes and Art, started gaining followers. Real people who saw my journey not as tragedy, but as triumph. They sent messages. They shared their own stories. I even got invited to speak on a podcast about healing through creativity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding my pain. I was using it, turning it into light, turning it into something that could help someone else find their way through the darkness. I got my first gallery showing last year. A small exhibit in a local Brooklyn space called Reclaimed. The night of the opening, I stood in the corner watching strangers walk past pieces of my soul hanging on the walls, and one woman, maybe in her 40s, stood in front of a piece titled, "She Chose Herself." She didn't say anything, just cried. Then she turned to me without knowing I was the artist and whispered, "This saved me." And in that moment, I understood what strength really meant. It wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about breaking and still choosing to stand. It was about loving yourself enough to walk away from what hurts, even if it leaves you empty for a while. It was about finding beauty in the wreckage and purpose in the pain. My mother and I talk sometimes now. She's been sober for 3 years. We're not close, not in the way movies show, but we're both trying. And that's more than I ever thought we'd have. I don't hate her anymore. I understand now she was just as lost as I once was. As for love, I haven't given up on it. I've just stopped chasing it. If someone comes along who matches the peace I've found, I'll welcome it. But if not, I know now that I am complete, on my own. My name is Angelina. I'm 28 years old. I've lived through a broken home, a shattered heart, and the kind of loneliness that could have swallowed me whole. But I didn't let it. I found myself in the ruins. I found purpose in the ashes. I found strength in the storm, and now I no longer just survive. I thrive.